to talk about today Abishag in 1 Kings chapter 1. And so everybody go there. And Karis told me, Mom, you don't give the people time to get to where you're going. And you just start rattling on. So. That's true. Who said that? All right. Are we at 1 Kings, everybody? All right. 1 Kings. Okay. Now, King David was old. And that's probably going to offend some of us. It did me. How old do you think David was?
70.
70. He was 70, and he was old. And more commentary that David, up to age 50, did pretty well. He was doing what God wanted. I mean, he was fighting and killing everybody, but it was the pagans he was killing. And then 50 is when the Bathsheba thing happened, when he should have been at war. When kings, in the spring, when kings go to war, David didn't go to war.
He had a midlife crisis.
Yes, and he saw Bathsheba, who was probably only in her 20s. So he was much older than her. Now he's 70 and very old. And further on in the chapter 2, it says he's very old, probably because he lived such a hard life. He was running from Saul for 10 years, in and out of caves. He was fighting the Philistines all the time. But the real crowning moment was probably the sin with Bathsheba. And then all the rebellions of the son. He didn't do, after Amnon raped Tamar, he didn't do anything. It said he was very angry, but he didn't do anything. And that's why Absalom and Maacah took things into their own hands. Because after he did that, Amnon always had guards around him because he knew Absalom was going to get him sooner or later. Well, 2 years passed until Absalom finally had the little feast that he invited all his brothers to, and then he had his servants kill him. He was drunk, and then Absalom told the servants to kill him. And even then, David didn't do anything Absalom fled. And for 3 years, he wouldn't let him come back to Jerusalem. And Joab finally talked David into letting Absalom come back. But David wouldn't let him come. He had to be in his own house, not on the palace grounds. But he never did anything to punish him. And a lot of the commentary said David was such a good leader and was so good with his men and everything, but his family was just a mess. And that was probably because of the sin with Bathsheba. And when Nathan told him, the sword will never pass from your house because of what you dishonored God and took Uriah's wife for your wife, and so the sword will never pass from your house. And that's probably between the hard living, the fighting, and everything, that's why he got old before his time. So that's David 70 and stricken in years. And they covered him with clothes, but he got no heat. Wherefore his servants said unto him, Let there be sought for my lord the king a young virgin, and let her stand before the king, and let her cherish him, and let her lie in thy bosom, that my lord the king may get heat. All right, this seems kind of odd to us. Number one, they had to get a young virgin. He had all these wives. Why couldn't one of the wives do it? That was just a question that was never answered, but it was a common practice in those times when something like this happened. They would get young girls because the body heat. They didn't have electric blankets, obviously, and I don't know. They could have had hot stones.
Could have had a menopausal.
Right. But they could have had hot stones and wrap cloth around them and put them. But that was, and it's still practiced in some places in the Middle East today, where young women, because it's also not only for heat but for vitality. Maybe bringing back his vitality. And he probably had circulatory issues. That's what most people said. And his servants said unto him, Let them be sought for my king. Well, some of the commentaries said that they were doctors. They weren't just servants. They were attendant doctors that said this would be a good way to help you, get better. So they sought for a fair damsel throughout the coasts of Israel and found Abishag, a Shunammite, and brought her to the king. All right, Shunem, they went all over Israel. This was a serious mission. And Shunem is like 30 hours from walk from Jerusalem up to Shunem. It's in Jezreel Valley, and it's northern Israel between Mount Gilboa and Mount Tabor. It's close to Nazareth. Nazareth is about six or seven more miles further north. So, but they went all over Israel. And I guess the only qualification was that you were young and beautiful. And they think that, the commentaries think that she was somewhere between 12 and 14. So she was young, and she was just beautiful, beautiful apparently. And she was, Abishag means father of wandering, or my father wanders, or cause of wandering. And one of the things said, well, I guess that wasn't a really good start. What was going on in that family? But that's what it means. And she's of the tribe of Issachar. And this was in the Issachar's land that was given in the Promised Land. And the thing about Issachar was, which I never knew this, they were known as the tribe that was very intellectual, very educated, and prophesied with no prophecy. And she kind of followed in that she could anticipate what was going to happen, because when David was the king in Hebron with just Judah, and the other tribes were up north. That was a story with Ishabeth, and Saul's son became the king, Ishabeth, and remember he was weak, so Abner was kind of propping him up, and then Abner slept with Rizpah, or they thought he slept with Rizpah, and Ishabeth got very angry with him, but he couldn't do anything because Abner was the power behind the throne. And then some of Ishabeth's own men killed him, and then came to David and said, we killed him. Now you're king of everything. And David killed the killers. Said, you killed a man that was sleeping in his own bed. Killed the killers. But then there was going to be a civil war between the northern tribes and the southern Judah. And Issachar, the tribe of Issachar, came down and brought all their mighty men and their leaders of the tribes and spoke with David, and decided that they were going to go with David. And they persuaded all the other tribes to say, David's our new king. This is the best for everybody. And that's what happened. So even though you don't hear about it much, and it was a minor son of Leah, they had a lot of influence. It's just not tribe of Judah that had all the influence, or Benjamin. So, a lot of the sermons and everything I listened to about Abishag too said that not only she was beautiful, but she must have had a very sterling character. Because think about it, she's like 12 to 14. They're looking around Israel, and a lot of them, of the commentaries and the sermons, were saying like she had a choice. Did she really have a choice? If they came in and said, you're the one, the king, you're going to go to the king. But they're all talking like she had a choice. Well, women didn't have a lot of choices in those days, but maybe she did. If her father said, no, she's not going, that could have happened. But once, and it's not stated in the Bible or anywhere whether she went willingly. Or that was it. You're going to be. But she did, and they, later on in there, it says to cherish the king, and apparently she did cherish David, that they had a very close relationship, and that she was like his end-of-life caregiver, and did everything for him, and all the icky stuff that you think about, too. Somebody talked about what she had to do, because that's what she did. So, when they took her, she lost everything she'd known. Her family, she was never going to see her family again unless they came to the palace. Maybe they could have, she was in the palace and was right next to the king. She lost all her friends. She was a beautiful girl, so she probably had friends, and she probably had admirers, because at 12, they're starting to look for husbands for young girls in this time. So she probably had a bunch of admirers. She probably had a bunch of friends, because of what you perceive about her character. Freedom's gone. You're going to the palace, and once you're in the palace, that's it. You're in the concubines, or in the wives. There was an area of the palace where the wives and the concubines stayed. You were there. You didn't get to leave. You know, maybe you could if you got permission from the king, but that was where you lived and that's where you stayed. And her only future was tied to this dying man. What was going to happen? Well, it doesn't say anywhere. Abishag drops off after the whole thing with Adonijah, but she was probably stayed in with the concubines and other of David's wives. The next king inherits. So Solomon inherited all of David's wives and concubines, and so she probably stayed in the palace where the concubines were. So she lost everything. I mean, she loved David apparently, and so maybe that's what she wanted. But it was a real sacrifice for her. Or maybe she was excited, I get to live in the palace and be with the king. Who knows? It doesn't really say. But what she gave up was a lot, especially at that age. But they were much more mature in that time. If you're getting ready to get married at 12 and 13, you'd be a lot more mature than our 12 and 13-year-old and 20-year-olds are today. Sorry, Anna. All right, so verse 4. And the damsel was very fair and cherished the king and ministered to him, but the king knew her not. All right, she was beautiful and she did everything for the king and cherished him. So that tells you right there that there was a very good relationship. And some of the Jewish commentaries said that, you know, they just kind of ignore what the Bible actually said, that they hope that the people hoped that she would produce the final king, a final child, and that would be the undisputed king of Israel after David. Well, it says here that he knew her not, which in biblical terms means they had no relations. She laid in his bosom to keep him warm, but that was her job. Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared him chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Like I said, Adonijah, Adonijah, the A-boy, the guy.
A lot of them.
Yeah, right, there are a lot of them. Adonijah was the oldest son of David, and he was in line to be king. That was the thing. The next one, although, and it never really says that David. Some of the commentaries said that David was old and getting senile, and he wasn't running the kingdom like he should have been. But when you see what happens here, I don't believe that. He was just laid back. He was tired, but I don't think he was senile. But he never, which he should have done, he should have announced to the people that Solomon is the next king. He never did that. And the only places that it doesn't really say, when later on when we're going through here, Bathsheba says, you promised that Solomon was going to be king. There's nowhere where it specifically says that Solomon was going to, God told him he was going to build the temple, so you presume he's going to be the next king. And in 2 Samuel 12:10, Nathan tells David that's about the sword shall never pass. Okay, hold on where it says. There's two places where it says that God tells him that that his son Solomon's going to build the temple, and also when Solomon was born, God said he loved him, and his pet name for Solomon, his other name was Jedediah, which means loved by God. So that's another indication that Solomon was supposed to be, but David should have said it, and he was just and that the A-boy thought he was in line, and one of the characteristics to be the next king was too that you had to be very virile, apparent, and good looking. And Adonijah was apparently very good looking. I guess all David's kids pretty much were, but he was good looking, and he seemed to have some influence with the people, because when he got Joab and others to go with him, to go along with this, and there's reasons for that, which we'll go into. And so he exalted himself, and he did this. David didn't say, Adonijah was gonna be the next king. He just decided he was gonna do it on his own, which is against God. This is the beginning of his against God. And he prepared him chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. That was exactly what Absalom had done. So he's kind of following in the footsteps of Absalom. We see what happened to Absalom. And his father, David, had not displeased him at any time in saying, why hast thou not done so? So that's what's saying. David never disciplined his kids. He just kind of let them run wild, do what they want to do. And you'll see that Solomon was not very happy with that, because in the Proverbs he says all these things about how you should don't spare the rod and spoil the child, and that, a wayward son displeases his mother. If you go through Proverbs, there's all kinds of tips on how to discipline and to be a good parent. He obviously saw that David did not do that. And it all seems to boil down with that David didn't feel he had the moral authority to do it because of what had happened with Bathsheba. Or maybe he just didn't want to discipline his kids like people today.
Particularly Marilyn, if he was 50 before he did that.
Right. But he could have disciplined them between,
Exactly. Yeah.
And so back to 6. Why hast thou done so? He never disciplined him. And he also was a goodly man. That means handsome. So he made that characteristic. And his mother bare him after Absalom. His mother was not Absalom's mother. He just said he was the next son after Absalom. His mother was Haggith. And Absalom's was Maacah. And he conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with Abithiar, the priest, and they followed Adonijah, helped him. All right, this is really sad. Joab was the head of David's army, and they had kind of an on-off relationship, but once Joab killed Absalom, against the specific orders of David, after Absalom rebelled, and remember he got his hair caught in the oak tree because of his hair, and David said, don't kill him, but Joab killed him. And also Joab had killed Abner and Asa, and which they said they were much better men than him. But I think David was kind of scared of Joab because of his violent nature, and because, what else? Who knew about Uriah the Hittite? Joab knew that David had Uriah killed, so it's kind of like a blackmail thing too. Do something to me and I'll tell the people what really happened with you and Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite, who was one of David's respected mighty men, even though he was a Gentile too. Gentiles are better than Jewish people in a lot of cases, I think. But anyway, and Abishag was the priest that with David who carried the Ark of the Covenant. But he got mad because David appointed the next priest and kind of left him in the dirt. So it was, these guys was jealousy because David appointed the new commander of his army and a new priest. So they figured, go with the new guy and maybe we'll get back our exalted positions. But Zadok the priest, which is the new priest that took the place of Abiathar, and Benani the son of Jehoiada, who took over what Joab's position was, and Nathan the prophet, and Shimei and Reuel, and the mighty men which belonged to David, were not with Adonijah. All right. This is not the Shimei that cursed David. Remember when David was marching with his army and Shimei came and was cursing David, and one of his men said, I'll cut off his head, and David said, no, I probably deserve this, it's from God. And then when they marched back, he came up and said, sorry David, that was just a joke. So this isn't, but he gets his in the end when David is dying, and he gives Solomon his orders, and one of them is, you don't kill Shimei, but take care, watch him, because he could cause you trouble. Because he was of the house of Saul, and he was in line to be king. Had Saul's house continued and not gone to David, he couldn't possibly have been king. So he had something against David too, obviously. And Adonijah slew sheep and oxen and fat cattle by the stone of Zoraheth, which is in Enrogel, and called all his brethren, the king's sons, and all the men of Judah, the king's servants. So now he's sacrificing, which was one of the rituals that was done when the king was being crowned or ordained the king, that you do all this sacrifice. Again, he has no authority to do this. He's just doing it. But Nathan the prophet and Benaiah and the mighty men and Solomon his brother he called not. Well, guess what? He didn't ask Nathan, he didn't ask Benaiah, and he didn't ask Solomon to come to his coronation, because he knew that he was wrong. Wherefore Nathan spake unto Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, saying, Hast thou not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, doth reign, and David our Lord knoweth it not? Now therefore, come, let me, I pray thee, give thee counsel, that thou mayest save thine own life and the life of thy son Solomon. All right, Nathan hears about this first, because there's this big celebrations going down in the valley outside of Jerusalem, and he comes to Bathsheba and said, haven't you heard? Adonijah is crowning himself king. And this is a real danger, because when it was typical in those days, if there was anybody that could possibly get on the throne and you become king, you wipe them all out, so they're not going to go after you. And that's not why Solomon ultimately did to Adonijah. It was because of Adonijah's own, he cooked his own juice of what he did, because he had an opportunity. He had 2 opportunities and he blew it. And Solomon said, so anyway, so Nathan's saying, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you better do it, because you and Solomon are going to be dead if he takes the throne. Go. So Nathan says, go and get thee in unto King David, and say unto him, Didst not thou, my lord, O king, swear unto thy handmaid, saying, Assuredly Solomon thy son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne? Why then does Adonijah reign? Behold, while thou yet talkest there with the king, I will also come in after thee and confirm thy words. Okay, you go in, you tell David, remember, you said that Solomon was going to be king. What's up here? And then Nathan says, well, you're in there, I'll come in and confirm it. And why is that? Remember the 2 witness rule? That you couldn't, by 1 witness, you couldn't prove anything. In Deuteronomy, it says you have to have 2 witnesses, and this was following the 2 witness rule. Bathsheba's going to say it, and then Nathan's going to come in and say it. And Bathsheba went in unto the king into the chamber, and the king was very old. Here we go, very old. So a lot of us here are very, very old. And Abishag the Shunammite ministered unto the king. Abishag is here during all this. You never hear anything that Abishag says, but she's seeing all this that's going on, and she could have been called as a witness too if anything went wrong with what was here. And Bathsheba bowed and paid and did obeisance unto the king. And the king said, What wouldest thou? And she said unto him, My lord, thou swearest by the Lord thy God unto thine handmaid, saying, Assuredly Solomon thy son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne. And now behold, Adonijah reigneth, and now my lord the king, thou knowest it not. And he hath slain oxen and fat cattle and sheep in abundance, and hath called all the sons of the king, and Abiathar the priest, and Joab the captain of the host. But Solomon thy servant has not been called. And thou, my lord, O king, the eyes of all Israel are upon thee, that thou shouldest tell them, Who shall sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? Otherwise it shall come to pass, when my lord the king shall sleep with his fathers, which is a nice way of dying, and I and my son Solomon shall be counted offenders, which means they'll be executed. And notice here too, she doesn't say our son Solomon, she said my son Solomon. And some of the commentaries, interesting, said that David and Solomon probably didn't have a very close relationship. That David, if he'd had his choice, probably would have wanted Absalom to be king, because Absalom was more of a man's man, and that so he said, Solomon had all those wives and concubines because he was used to being around women, because he grew up in the palace, and he was babied and had anything he wanted. So, and David was out fighting and everything, and so he probably didn't see a lot of David. So that's why some of them said, you know, he wasn't David's. If David had had the choice and God hadn't told him, it probably wouldn't have been. And how upset David was when Absalom was dead, killed. My son, oh my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you? When Joab had to tell. That was a good move on Joab at that part. He said, you better stop that, because all the men, the Israeli men that died in his rebellion, they're saying, oh, you're crying about your son, but what about all the men that were loyal to you that died? So David chilled out after that. But he still mourned Absalom more than he seemingly mourned like Amnon and his other sons. Back to 24. 23. 22. And lo, while she yet talked with the king, Nathan the prophet also came in. And they told the king, saying, behold, Nathan the prophet. And when he was come in before the king, he bowed himself before the king with his face to the ground. And Nathan said, my lord, O king, hast thou said Adonijah shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne? For he is gone down this day, and hath slain oxen and fat cattle and sheep in abundance, and called all the king's sons and the captains of the host, and Abiathar the priest. And behold, they eat and drink before him, saying, God save the king, Adonijah. But me, even me thy servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and thy servant Solomon hath they not called. Is this thing done by my lord the king, that thou hast not shewed unto thy servant, who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? So Nathan's saying, hey, what's going on here? Did you say Adonijah could be king, and didn't bother to tell the rest of us? Then David answered and said, call me Bathsheba. And she came into the king's presence and stood before the king. And the king swore. And this is when I think kind of proves David wasn't senile. He hears all this and says, oh, I really need to take some action now. Should have done it before probably, but you know, it's not too late. Then King David answered and said, call me Bathsheba. And she came into the king's presence and stood before the king. And the king sware and said, as the Lord liveth, that hath redeemed my soul out of all my distress. And what a good thing for him to say, God has redeemed him out of all his distress. All the trouble David's had and all the trouble he did. Now he's saying, God got me out of everything. Even as I swear unto thee by the Lord God of Israel, saying, assuredly Solomon thy son, so look at, he's even saying it, Solomon thy son, not Solomon our son, Solomon thy son, shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne in my stead. Even so will I certainly do this day. And that can be just because he's distinguishing from all the other sons he had. But as one of the commentators said, you know, when you have, your kids are being good. Oh, they're our kids. And that's your son doing that. We've all been there. Then Bathsheba bowed her face with her face to the earth and did reverence to the king and said, let my lord King David live forever, which is kind of ironic. He's dying as they speak. And King David said, call me Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. And they came before the king. So now he's calling all his loyal people, the Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and the Benaiah, who's head of his troops. And the king also said to them, take with you the servants of your lord, his servants, and cause Solomon, now he's calling my son, to ride upon mine own mule and bring him to Gibeon. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him there over Israel. And blow ye with the trumpet and say, God save Solomon. Then he shall come up after him, and he may come and sit upon my throne, for he shall be king in my stead, and I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah. And Benaiah the son of Jehoiada answered the king and said, amen, the Lord God of my lord king say so too. And the Lord hath been with my lord the king, even so be he with Solomon, make his throne greater than the throne of my lord King David. He's not saying Solomon's, I hope Solomon's a better king. He's just, that's like Bathsheba said, oh, may he live forever. That's just, he's saying, we want Solomon to be a good king, just like you are. Then Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada and the Cherethites and the Pelethites went down and caused Solomon to ride upon King David's mule and brought him to Gihon. All right, some interesting stuff in this little 38 verse, that the Pelethites and Cherethites are David's personal guard, like the president has his own social security team, which is interesting. They're Philistines. They're uncircumcised Philistines, and they're his most trusted protectors. Says a lot about the Israelites. And they went down and caused Solomon to ride upon King David's mule and brought him to Gihon. All right. The reason he rode, number one, it was the king's mule, and only the king or whom he designated could use anything of the king's. And why was it a mule and not a horse?
Horse was an animal of war.
Right. Mules help people, and that it was supposed to be, mules worked for men, and it was supposed to be symbolic too of the king was going to work for his people. And the mule was when you were coming in triumph. Horses meant war. That it would have scared the people if the new king came riding in on a horse. And think about the parallel to Jesus. Jesus came into Jerusalem the first time on a mule or donkey, whatever. In Revelation, he's coming back with the horse. And you better be on top of it. Okay. And they brought him to Gihon. And from that point forward, when Solomon's being anointed king in Gihon, that's where all the rest of the kings were anointed, in this place. It's a place that two streams meet, and it's the bottom of Jerusalem. And I guess being near a stream of water had some significance. Don't know what it was, but apparently. And Zadok the priest took an horn of oil out of the tabernacle and anointed Solomon. And they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, God save King Solomon. All right, when you hear that anointed with oil, we're thinking about, they take, like when sometimes in the church, when sick people get anointed to try and make them well, that you just put a little bit. They took an animal's horn and dumped it all over their head, and it was all over their face and their clothes. Ew! But it wasn't just a little bit of thing. It was a whole big wampum of oil. So oil's everywhere. And so I guess he's going on the mule with oil everywhere. And the people, and they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, God save King Solomon. Well, it wasn't all the peoples, because we still have Adonijah down in where he's still thinking about he could be king. And all the people came up after him, and the people piped with pipes and rejoiced with great joy, so the earth rent with the sound of them. So obviously, and it's amazing, how did they get all those people together so quickly? Because this was a quick announcement of what was going on. And maybe there were stragglers from Adonijah's thing, but whatever. And Adonijah and all the guests that were with him heard it as they had made an end of eating. And when Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, he said, Wherefore is this noise of the city being in an uproar? And when he had yet spake, behold, Jonathan the son of Abiathar, the priest, came. And Adonijah said to him, Come in, for thou art a valiant man, and bringest good tidings. So Adonijah thinks that, this is going to be good news. These people must be celebrating me. And Jonathan answered and said, Adonijah, verily, my lord, King David hath made Solomon king. And the king hath sent with him Zadok the priest, and Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and they have caused him to ride upon the king's mule. And also the fact that he's riding on the king's mule means for sure, David has approved, this is our new king. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king in Gihon, and they are come up from thence rejoicing, so that the city rang again. This is the noise that ye have heard. And also Solomon sitteth on the throne of the kingdom. And moreover, the king's servants came to bless our Lord King David, said, God make the name of Solomon better than thy name, and make his throne greater than thy throne. And the king bowed himself upon the bed. And also thus said the king, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, which hath given me one to sit on my throne this day, mine eyes even seeing it. And all the guests were with Adonijah were afraid, and rose up, and every man went his own way. He has a real loyal crowd too. And they hear this and they scatter, because just like Solomon, that Nathan was telling Bathsheba and Solomon, you're with the traitor, you're going to be killed. And Adonijah feared because of Solomon, and rose and went and caught hold on the horns of the altar. Now think about this. Solomon's somewhere between 12 and 15. Adonijah is 35, but he knows his days are numbered, and he's fearful of Solomon and what Solomon can do, because he's been approved by David, he's been approved by the people, and he's been approved by the prophet and the war men and everybody. So he's in trouble. And when you go, this was a way, like, remember when you used to play hide and seek and there was home base? And you'd run home and you were safe? That's kind of like what the horns of the altar were, because it was the big, where the sacrifices went, where the priest did the sacrificing, and there were 4 big horns on each end of the altar. And it was known in the Old Testament, started this, that if you got to the altar and held onto the horns, that you couldn't be hurt. Although Joab gets it holding on to the horns, but it was supposed to be you were home free and no one could hurt you. And it was told Solomon, saying, Behold, Adonijah feareth King Solomon, for lo, he hath caught hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear unto me today that he will not slay his servant with the sword. Notice how he's not calling him his servant. And Solomon said, If he will shew himself a worthy man, there shall not a hair on him fall to the earth. But if wickedness shall be found in him, he shall die. So Solomon says, you do right, you're fine. But don't do anything wrong or you will die. So Solomon sent, and they brought him down from the altar, and he came and bowed himself to King Solomon. And Solomon said unto him, Go to thine house. Which is interesting. He's the 12 or 16-year-olds telling the 35-year-olds, go to your house. All right, now, okay, the next chapter 2 is when David dies, and he gives the instructions to Solomon. And he's telling him, get rid of a lot of people, Joab and Shimei and Abiathar the priest. He didn't kill because he just sent him home. He got stripped of the priesthood. But he didn't kill him, because he said, you went through a lot of hard times with my father, and you carried the Ark of the Covenant, so I'm letting you go, but you're not going to be a priest anymore. And that was the end of the priest line with Eli. Remember, because Eli had sinned, and God said, the priest of your priest line is going to end. Well, that was the end of it. And because Zadok was of the line of Phinehas. So, okay, and he says, but show kindness unto Barzillai the Gileadite, and have him eat at your table, because they were the ones that helped David when Absalom was after him. All right, so now, on verse 10 of chapter 2, and he said, it's interesting too, he tells Solomon, be a man. Okay, 12 or 13 or 16, okay, be a man. So David slept, verse 10, David slept with the fathers and was buried in the city of David. And he reigned over Israel for 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, and 3 years in Jerusalem. 12, then sat Solomon upon the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was established greatly. Okay, so and since David approved of it, and David's now dead, the people are gone, this is now our king, and everybody's approving it. And Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and she said, "Comest thou peacefully?" And he said, "Peacefully." So she knows there's still tension going on. You know, "Comest thou peacefully?" So he goes to Bathsheba. He said, "Moreover, I have something to say unto thee." And she said, "Say on." And he said, "Thou knowest that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their faces on me, that I should reign." Well, that's kind of an exaggeration, but in theory, he should have been, because of his position as the oldest, might have been, but the whole Israel wasn't for him. Some were, because they thought they were gonna be able to profit from his kingship. But anyway, howbeit the kingdom is turned about and has become my brother's, for it was from the Lord. So people, at least in the family, must have known that Solomon was anointed by the Lord, because even he admits it, that this was from the Lord. I didn't get it because it was from the Lord. "And now I ask one petition of thee, deny me not." And she said, "Say to him, say on." And he said, "Speak, I pray thee, unto Solomon the king, for he will not say thee nay. For he give me Abishag the Shunammite to wife." And Bathsheba said, "Well, I will speak for thee unto the king." Bathsheba therefore went unto King Solomon to speak unto him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her, and bowed himself unto her, and sat down in his throne, and caused a seat to be set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right hand. All right, watch this. How he is being so obedient and respectful. He's the king. He's the king, and he's bowing down to his mom. Something we've lost in today's world, respect for parents, for elders, etc. And he even has a throne for her on his right-hand side. Then she said, "I desire one small petition of thee. I pray thee, say me not nay." And the king said unto her, "Ask on, my mother, for I will not say thee nay." And she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah thy brother to wife." And King Solomon answered and said unto his mother, "And why dost thou ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him for the kingdom also, for he is mine elder brother, even for him, and for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah have not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord liveth, which hath established me, and set me on my throne of David my father, who hath promised me an house, as he promised Adonijah, shall be put to death this day." And King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him that he died. So, I saw, listened to and read a lot of stuff like, why did he kill Adonijah just for asking for Abishag? This was a ploy to get the throne. Just like with Absalom, who slept with David's concubines on the roof of the palace to all the Israel, and like when Abner slept with Rizpah, it was to show that you had a legitimate claim to the throne. And based upon what had happened before, when he tried to crown himself king, if he had part of David's concubines or any of them, it would give him more of a legitimacy to the throne. And Solomon, even at his young age, saw through this. And I read different accounts of why Bathsheba did this. Didn't she know? Well, most of them said she did know. She knew, but she went to Solomon because she knew as long as Adonijah was around, it was a threat. It was a threat. So she didn't want to say, kill him. So she went to him, David, and acted like this innocent. Oh, he wants to have Abishag for his wife. And she knew what Solomon's response was going to be. So she did it. Some of the commentators said she did it on purpose. Others said she was naive, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that. She said to Nathan, you know, we're going to go down if he becomes king. So why would she say, you know, and she had to know that that was you could have a claim to the throne if you had one of the concubines or wives of the former king. And the rules back then were too that you couldn't, like Bathsheba could not, after David died, she couldn't marry anybody but another king. If you were once the king's wife or concubine, you had to stay in that stature. And, you know, there couldn't be a lot of new kings that you could marry, so there wasn't a lot of marrying going on for the wives of the dead kings. But that was one of the rules that were going on. And you couldn't, if the new king was like a son, somehow related to the way you were before, the concubine or the wife, you couldn't marry the son either. So there was lots of rules about that. Of course, they took so many. Solomon, 700 and 300. 700 wives and 300 concubines. You have to have name tags. Who would do that? I just, you know, who would do that? Who would even know, you know, who are you? Well, I'm your 14th wife. Oh, okay. So, all right, so, also it tells, how he killed all the rest of them. Like, Joab knew his time was up, so he fled to the temple and held on to the horns. And Solomon said, kill Joab. So Benaiah, who's the executioner, went and he said, you know, I'm coming to kill you. And he said, you can't kill me. The horns. So he went back to Solomon, or he said, no, kill me here in the temple. If you're gonna kill me here in the temple. And Benaiah didn't want to do that. He went back to Solomon and he said, kill him in the temple. And Solomon says, go for it. So he went back and he killed Joab in the temple, and they drug him away, and he got buried in his hometown. And the priest got stripped of the priesthood, and Shimei, the guy that had cursed David said, you don't have to kill him, but take care of him. So what happened, he called, which I don't understand how he didn't get killed, but David called him in and said, I'm not gonna kill you, but you get a house in Jerusalem and you don't go past, outside of Jerusalem or you're gonna die. He said, oh, deal. So 2 or 3 years passed and he stayed in Jerusalem, and then 2 of his servants or slaves ran away outside of Jerusalem, and he went outside to get them. And there's spies all over, obviously, in Jerusalem, so somebody told Solomon. He got back. He retrieved his servants or his slaves, got back, and Solomon called him in and said, you broke the deal, you're dead. So Benaiah killed him. So, but some of the commentators said David did this because Solomon was so young and so inexperienced, and he was afraid all these people would be a real thorn in his side and that he would have trouble, and he wanted to make it as smooth a transition and as easy as Solomon as possible. So, and okay, we don't know, Abishag is the last thing we hear about her, and we don't know if she knew about this thing about Adonijah wanting to have her as a wife. It's unclear. Did she know? Did she care? But most of the commentators said, she just went to the concubine room and the old wives' rooms, and that's where she spent the rest of her life. And there's no more about her, except some of the people think that, some of the commentators think that the Shunammite in the Song of Solomon is Abishag. That they would have known each other because she was caring for David, and they were probably about the same age. He was 12 to 16 when he took the throne. She was 12 to 14 when she became, and David only lived a year from the time she came to him. So they were about the same age, but don't know. Could have been. Most people think it isn't, that it was, the Shunammite that's talked about in the Song of Solomon was David's first wife and the only wife that he truly loved. You know, they make their own decisions about what's what, and you just read a whole lot of things. Oh, I know where it says about, in 1 Chronicles 22, 9 and 10, that's where it says that God said that Solomon's gonna build the temple. And the presumption is if Solomon's building the temple, he's obviously the next king after David. But like I said, David should have made that clear to everyone. And there wouldn't have been so much of all these problems. Let me see. Oh, that's what he did. Oh, and the same thing like we said, that Adonijah was trying to do like Abner did with Rizpah. It seemed to be the way that you would try to backdoor getting in to be king, if you tried to get the former king's wives or concubines to do. And some of the stuff I read too said that David wasn't really, that Israel expected their king to be virile and everything, and that's why he was losing all his power, because he wasn't seen as a sick old man. And that was one of the reasons too that they got back Abishag to maybe kick in his virility. But that's not what the Bible said, so that's not what, that's just extra biblical, and you can get a lot of extra biblical stuff. And I also find it interesting, go back to the, where it says, 6, and the father, the one we were talking about, he never disciplined his children, and the father had not displeased him at any time in saying, why hast thou not done so? Some of the commentators interpreted that to say that David approved of what was going on. That he never disciplined him because he approved of everything he did. Mm-hmm. See how you can twist things, and if you don't know the background and what's actually, read the whole context of what stuff is going on, it can be taken so out of context, and it can appear to be truth because the way it looks like that, and you could interpret that he had not displeased his father at any time. Well, Adonijah has never displeased his father. Why wouldn't he be the next? He's good looking, he never displeased his father, and he's the oldest son. Why shouldn't he be king? But the truth was, he went behind David's back and thought, he's old, he's gonna be dead soon, so I'm gonna make myself king before anybody else can take the position. And he might have gotten away with it, but for Nathan. Because it didn't look like Bathsheba was gonna go forward, but who knows? Solomon was gonna be king one way or the other because it was a line to Jesus. And we all know that God was gonna keep the line going to Jesus, So, any questions, comments?
Awesome. What commentaries do you usually use? Do you have a book of commentaries? Or?
No, I go, there's, YouTube has like sermons and you put in a name and that's where I found, this one guy was so awful. And I listened to the whole thing. I can't believe I listened. It was so awful, and he didn't say anything of value, but I was listening to it on and off. I'm not completely, but no, and some will be really good, and some won't. And then I just go into Google and say, what's the commentary on whatever the passage is.
Well, I thought you might have a commentary Bible or something.
No, well, I do have, study Bibles, and I got some of this from the study Bible. I have like 10 or so study Bibles. Son of which got wet with the storm. I had them in my car, laying in a bag on the floor of my car, and it rained so much it got wet underneath, and I dried them. Huh?
This past one?
Yes! There was so much water. I live in Longboat, and where our street is, it's getting lower and lower. Luckily, it's not low as the property next door that's a swimming pool every time it rains, and it came up, and and they're dried out now, but they're also not this big. And theirs is one of my favorite study Bibles. It was so sad.
Which one was it?
I don't
What's your
remember.
favorite one?
I don't remember now. I have so many.
Well, I have one that's the Complete Jewish Bible.
Oh, really?
Yeah, do you want her?
I have the Jerusalem Bible, but I don't have one called the
Okay, so
Completion.
this is like Christian, Jewish, Messianic.
So, oh, okay, so it is Messianic, it isn't Jewish, okay, I mean,
Well, yes,
it's
it
Jewish, but it's Messianic Jewish.
Right. It's
Oh, I
like-
bet they have some
They
interesting
do,
stuff.
but they don't comment on the things that you want them to comment
Yeah,
on.
right.
A lot of times, you know, like things you wonder about sometimes, you know, they just have little things at the bottom. But what's really interesting about that one is they will, which I didn't ever know before I had this, was, all the traditions and stuff that they have.
Right.
You know, it has a lot of that, and then it's got a lot of the Hebrew mixed in, so you know what the Hebrew word is, like Hosanna means God save us, which you don't usually
Right,
know that means that.
right, right,
And it has a lot of, yeah, it's been very interesting.
right.
So
Just don't read the Jewish commentaries, they're so,
Well, this is Jewish commentary.
No, this is, I'm talking about like long commentaries, or there's one, I read it every time and just, the Jewish, I think it's called JAW, it's Jewish Women or something, and it talks about the Jewish women, and, you know, it's Jewish, and then the women of the Bible. And that's the stuff where I'm telling you, you know, some of this far out stuff's coming from. So, but it's interesting, cause how they perceive things, that's the perception of things, you know?
Yeah, that's what the traditions that they had.
Right.
Because we don't know the traditions that they had. So it's really interesting because it's so different.
Right. And
What
even,
we
like you
taught.
said, the Messianic Jewish traditions are so different from, you know, the Christian tradition.
Right, because they're still based on Jewish,
Right.
it's just they accept Christ.
And I just found this out that one of my kids at Public, works at Public, said this one, oh, it was the other one, Karis, said this woman was asking if there was a Messianic Jewish, there's a difference between temple and synagogue, Messianic.
Yeah,
And there is one that used to be on Swift, one of those, and now it's in Lakewood Ranch, but she said it wasn't the right one. The closest one of whatever she wanted, the synagogue or the temple, was in St. Pete or Tampa. So I went to one of the oh my gosh, their services are so long. It started at 7 and at 11:30 it was still going on. We finally left. I had
I was
little
thinking about
kids.
the time when, was it with Moses when he was singing along, they stood from morning until night with all their children. I thought, how could you possibly do that with your kids, stand there, standing all
Right.
day long to listen to
And the
word
old
of
people, you know, how are you standing?
Damn.
Really? Lay on top of me, kids, I can't stand anymore. You know, yeah, it's amazing. Well, and when they talk about that too, in the young churches in Africa a lot, they stand, and the services go on for hours and hours, and we complain
God. Oh,
after
I
it
did not
happens.
know that. I didn't know they stood for their services.
Sometimes, not all of them, I've seen, you know, so, and we complain after a half hour in our plush seats in the church.
Are you gonna
They're
become
so
a lawyer
spoiled.
too?
Americans are
Probably
so
not.
spoiled. But, hey, so privilege, so it's spoiled privilege,
Probably
but
not.
blessed that we can.
I
under
wanted
the
to at one point.
circumstances. Alright, next week, last week, Gomer, and so I'm thinking about what to do for next spring. And Karis goes, you need to do more in the Bible, maybe little known women of the New Testament, not the Old Testament. So that's one of the options I'm thinking about, and another option is that I'm thinking about, and there won't be any book, I gotta give you a book. I don't like books, I'm sorry, you know, unless, who knows Kay Arthur's Bible studies? Nobody would do that, nobody would, in Kay Arthur Bible studies, you have to study, if you're really gonna do it, 1 to 3 hours a night, am I right? But then she did what she never said she'd do. She dumbed down where she has a series called In and Out, which you don't have to do any homework. You just, you know, have the book and you talk. Well, one's so much, which I liked it though. I liked it, but it forced you to study the Bible. Because my sister taught a Kay Arthur course once. I taught one too. Anyway, she said, do you give homework? And I said, well, I have the scripture where it's done. I said, but homework doesn't seem to be real popular these days. And she said, well, people need to study the Bible. And I said, well, you know,
You can't make them though.
right,
You
you
can't
can't,
have it, you know,
you're right.
if they don't wanna do it, they're
you're not gonna do it.
The ones that
But
do
see,
it.
I think sometimes your method of teaching, because it's worked for me, it's caused me to want to go and
And look
do
at
And look
that.
it up and see.
And
what-
Brilliant,
dig
brilliant,
deeper.
am I telling you
Yeah.
the truth?
Feed me, kid,
You're
don't
right.
make me work for it.
Then you'll work after I fed you.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good, that's good. So, okay, so little known women of the New Testament, or I was also thinking about like, not necessarily parables, but like stories that Jesus told. Like, I've always liked the Luke story about the rich man and Lazarus.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I love, and the prodigal son. So, but Karis, I talked to Karis about this, she goes, everybody should know that, Mom, why would you even teach that?
Because even though it's a common thing, there's a lot of insight.
Right, there's so much, like when for example, the prodigal son, when dad saw him coming, he pulled up his robes and ran for him, and that was just a no-no in that time. That was so disgraceful to do that, but who would know that? That's a Jewish thing,
Yeah,
who would
exactly.
know that?
Right.
And that he was so disgraced, his neighbors and everything thought so less of him because he was wanting his prodigal son back that he should have totally, disinherited and gotten rid of. So, and then a lot of people don't talk about the son, the other son who was such a
Right,
snark.
right.
So, and then, and the rich man and Lazarus, I just find that story, that just the insights, he was in hell, but he could see and everything, that was so, what are your thoughts? And we're over time, so somebody has to go or don't, but, so what are your thoughts? Nobody's thinking?
I like the women.
But when is it? In the spring?
Spring.
Spring? You're waiting till spring?
That,
Well, that's what we did last year, but if you're
I mean, we
available,
couldn't like continue.
take a break and continue.
I wonder in the winter months, but I don't know whether she's gonna be doing that again.
She's not doing it.
Yeah.
she's not,
Now, we started, Jane did like February.
Uh-huh.
all right, I need a break though, guys, I need a break, this is really all consuming.
She's still working.
I work pretty much full-time. I mean, I call my full-time, but I love it. It's all-consuming, but I've learned so much, and then, it's like you, look at here, oh no, now I gotta go and look at what that says, and you're just all over the Bible and the things that you've read before, but it never, that's what that's about, it's just, I love it.
It's a great deal like
Commentaries
my
give different insights.
Sunday school class.
It is.
I love, that's the best
Well, when
Sunday
you're
school
ready
class
to
I've
start
ever been
back,
in
you
my
should
life.
Okay. So you like the women thing? Any
We'll
other?
do both, women and then parables or parables and then women.
All right. Well, thank you. Oh, we got a break.
You want me to?
Yes, Brenda, I'm sorry, I'm yapping away.
Father, as we close this meeting, we thank you for making it peaceful and fruitful. And thank you, Lord, for Marilyn's teaching and for Edna's organizational skills.
Amen.
And please see us to our home safely today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
And thank you for everybody that's here.